So we all have promised to remember him always. And we're all quite willing and eager to do that. But human memory is fleeting. On Mondays and Thursdays, I have door duty after school. And I don't trust my own memory, so on the board it says, remind me I have door duty on Mondays and Thursdays. And the students have gotten good during last period of raising their hand, and I'll call on one of them, and they'll say, Mr. Scofield, you have door duty today. I'll say, thank you, because it was the furthest thing from my mind until he said that. So, I tell them it's even better if you can remind me in the last 10 minutes. My wife knows how important it is that I get frequent reminders. But I think that's the way it is with all of us. We mean to remember. We know we should remember. We know we're better off if we remember. We intend to remember. We promise to remember. But we've got to keep him central. We've got to put ourselves in places and develop habits and spend our time in ways that shows and that assists us in remembering him. During December, we hear the story told several times from the second chapter of Luke about the night of Jesus' birth. It's a great story. It's an old story, and I love to hear it. But there's more to this story. In the second chapter of Luke, the most important part is the beginning, yes. But there are some verses I want to share with you today from the second chapter of Luke that happen after that night. It's not recorded what happens the next night or the night after or so many nights. But we do know that Jesus begins to grow up. He's born, but then he begins to grow up. And he's got a job to do, and from the beginning he knows and understands that job. And from the beginning, Mary and Joseph knew that this child would be special, and the angel told them so. But still, imagine having in your home the Christ child. So I'm going to hopscotch through some of the verses in Luke 2. I'll tell you what verses I'm at. Luke 2, 18 and 19. Well, I do a little bit of preface each one. 18 and 19 are the verses right after the shepherds arrive at the manger and tell Joseph and Mary why they're there and all that the angel shared with them and told them. All they who heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. I'm going to skip over to verse 33. After Simeon sees the baby Jesus and blesses him at the temple. Verse 33, and Joseph and Mary marveled at those things which were spoken of the child. Jesus continues to grow and travel with them. And then one day he's missing, and they come back and find him teaching the doctors, the learned people in the temple. Verse 50 and 51. Verse 50, 51, 52. And they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them. And his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Mary's keeping a lot of things in her heart. And she's receiving daily reminders. And she probably was chosen because she has such a big heart. And she's pondering those things. They're just stored away and kept tucked. She's pondering on the things that are said about him and that he says and does. And Jesus is increasing in wisdom and stature with God and with man. So he's learning more. And he's got a job to do, and he knows it, and he understands it. And he's an eager participant. And everybody that Jesus meets and sees and smiles at and shakes hands with and exchanges words with probably can tell he's special. And he'd probably like to have each and every one of them immediately become followers and obey his Father's commandments. But he can't make them. He could make them, but he was chosen for the job because he said he wouldn't make them. He could just touch each person he sees and change their heart and everybody he meets, and it would just spread. He'd just get a bigger and bigger army of followers and believers, and they'd know. They'd really know. But they wouldn't have had that experience. They wouldn't have had that choice. They wouldn't have had that conversion moment. So his job then is to tell them things and set them examples and live in a way and explain things so that people can make their own choice. People can understand that, oh, this is a marvelous plan. I want to be part of it. It could be so easy, but it's not because of human nature. I want to go to Doctrine and Covenants, section 90. I have favorite scriptures. I have favorite verses and favorite chapters and favorite books. But this Doctrine and Covenants 90, verse 5 might be the favorite of my favorites. So many verses to me seem to lead to this. Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made, neither indeed can be. All truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it to act for itself, as all intelligence also. Otherwise, there is no existence. Behold, here is the agency of man, and here is the condemnation of man, because that which was from the beginning is plainly manifest unto them, and they received not the light. Plainly manifest unto us. But sometimes we fail to receive the light. My wife and I were driving down the road one day, and I noticed some ducks out on a pond, a frozen pond, or at least partially frozen, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to stand on it. They would have been swimming in it. And this one particular duck caught my eye, not because he was special, but perhaps because he was closest or standing where I could see him really well. And I just looked at that duck for a while as we drove by. And my wife was driving. I wasn't driving. But even after he was out of sight, I was still thinking about that duck. And there was nothing extraordinary about that duck. I probably couldn't pick him out of a lineup today, because all ducks look the same to me. But I was thinking about that duck and him standing out there on that patch of ice and wondering why. Why? I mean, he's barefoot. And you know, ducks have those rubbery feet. Rabbits and dogs and cats at least have fur on them. We can kind of convince ourselves that maybe they'd be warm enough out in the snow. But the duck in his bare feet just standing there in that pond, I couldn't do that. If God told me, Larry, today I need you to go stand on this patch of ice. For how long? Who knows? And barefoot. I could do that if Jesus told me to, but I'm glad he didn't tell me to. But that duck, not murmuring, not complaining, the duck was doing what a duck does. And God created ducks to fulfill some purpose. I'm not a duckologist, so I can't say for sure, but I imagine it helps when they swim around in the pond and churn up the water to oxygenate it. And probably some good comes out of them eating the weeds along the shore so that it doesn't all become covered over. And I hope they eat their share of the mosquito larvae. That would be a help and a blessing. But in the winter, a duck's not doing any of those things. I don't know what a duck's supposed to do in the winter, except maybe just stand and wait for his next orders. So he and his fellows stood there, out in the cold and the barefoot on that ice. And I don't know what a duck thinks, and I don't know what's in a duck's heart. I don't know what he ponders, but he's got a lot of time to ponder. And I don't have much time to think and ponder. So I could be a good duck that way. I always wish I could have more time to just think and do nothing except think. But we don't give ourselves times to think. We spend just long enough to solve the problem in front of us, and then we get going on to the next task. But God said it's important to ponder. And all through the scriptures, there's a lot of pondering. In Daniel, chapter 7 of Daniel, he had a vision, that vision of the 4 beasts. And there was a lot going on in that vision. And so he wrote it down, and he was explaining it. I wrote it down in his paper somewhere. Here it is. Daniel 7, verse 28. He gets to the end of the chapter, and he's told us everything that he saw in that vision, described all the symbolism on those beasts and all the consequences that will come to the nation of Israel and the others. And then I like the last finishing verse in the chapter. Verse 28 says, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." He didn't insist on perfect understanding. He interpreted it to as far as he could go. He didn't discard it just because it didn't all make perfect sense immediately to him. He kept that matter in his heart. It made a change in him, and it weighed on him, but he kept that matter in his heart. In 2 Nephi, chapter 3, verses 29 and 30, as he's writing down, making notes on the plates, Nephi writes, "For my soul delights in the scriptures, and my heart ponders them, and writes them for the learning and the profit of my children. Behold, my soul delights in the things of the Lord, and my heart ponders continually upon the things which I have seen and heard." I think we're expected to ponder, and I think that may be part of where my problem is that in my rush and in the hustle and bustle of the normal day, I don't reflect enough. I don't internalize enough. I don't return to the core of what I've promised to remember as often as I might. As Jesus was growing up and meeting people and increasing in stature and wisdom and figuring out how it was that he was going to convince these people around him that the gospel was good for them and that they should sign up and be part of the plan, he was probably frustrated at times. I mean, when you understand everything and when you see the whole big picture, it's a little frustrating to try to have people you're trying to tell it to and them not paying attention or confusing things or forget what you already told them yesterday. He tried to make it as simple as he could in memorable parables, things like that. He tried to be a good teacher. He succeeded in a lot of cases. It spread, it grows, even today. But he didn't succeed in all cases, and I wonder if it's a little bit like, not a lot like, but maybe a little bit like a grown and educated, sophisticated man, wizened and experienced, being dropped in the midst of some middle schoolers and told to teach them. It should be so easy. They should want to learn. They should be glad to be taught. It'd be easy to get A's. All you have to do is listen and do what I say. Do when I say it. But we're all middle schoolers in a sense. We're all children. We're all flawed. We all have our own agendas. And God's ways are too big. Sometimes we think, I don't know, I don't understand it. I don't see why this is happening to me. I don't see why I should go along with this. I don't want to spend my time doing that. We get selfish. We get nearsighted. And the plan is big and it includes all of us and all the people that came before us and all the people that came after us, that will come after us. And that's a lot. Since I teach history and social studies, I've started to wonder, history teachers always have and probably always will teach history from the beginning, all those things that happened thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, so that we can understand how we got to where we got. And then if everything goes well, then you give them the exam and they get an A and they go on. But I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just teach history like the first semester be everything that has been, and the second semester teach the history of everything that will be? Teach the future. We do some lessons on that. We don't have the textbooks written yet, but if we put our minds to it and thought and pondered, we could make plans and set goals and intentions. It might not all come to be the way that we put it on our test and worksheets. But we ought to think about the future. We ought to think not just about the past, but about where we're headed, because that's what God was always trying to remind us. It was about the kingdom to come. Philippians 4, verses 7 and 8. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. It's like we're told in Matthew 6 to keep these treasures in our heart. We don't need the answers. God has all the answers. God has the answers to everything. Last week, I got the lyrics. I'm not going to sing it. Last week, we got to hear True Blue sing a song that I thought, that's perfect for next week, for the way my thoughts are going. He knows how gravity works. He knows how far it is between heaven and earth. He even knows what tomorrow will bring. He's got an answer for everything. There's nothing he doesn't understand. He knows your heart like the back of his hand. He wants to help you, but you've got to believe. We try to figure out what makes the world go round. To us, it's so complicated. But it's no mystery to him. Why should it be? After all, he's the one who made it. There's no question too hard for him. Believe me, I've talked with him time and again. But here's what I learned when I was down on my knees. He's got an answer for everything. I believe he's got an answer for everything. I believe that he made all things. I believe that he comprehends all things. I believe that he is through and in all things. Mosiah 2, verses 12 to 17. That's the only path to salvation. And then in 17 it says, if you believe these things, see that you do them. So that's simple. I have to do them. This last verse I want to close with. The scripture passage comes from Doctrine and Covenants, section 50, verses 8, D through G. Behold, ye are little children, and ye cannot bear all things now. Ye must grow in grace and in the knowledge of the truth. Fear not, little children, for you are mine, and I have overcome the world, and you are of them that my Father hath given me. And none of them that my Father hath given me shall be lost. And the Father and I are one. I am in the Father, and the Father in me. And inasmuch as ye have received me, ye are in me, and I in you. Wherefore I am in your midst. I am the good shepherd, and the stone of Israel. He that buildeth upon this rock shall never fall. And the day cometh that you shall hear my voice and see me, and know that I am. Watch therefore, that ye may be ready. Even so, Amen. Somewhere, a duck is standing on the ice. doing what his Maker created him to do, and not murmuring or complaining, just ever ready to do what good ducks do. Let's be at least as good as a duck.